Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Tree Stands, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine show right here on the Outdoor Magazine Radio Network. More than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan for 3 hours each week talking about the history and tradition of the outdoor lifestyle here in the great state of Michigan and occasionally beyond. Hunting, fishing, shooting, trapping, wildlife issues, conservation issues, and even some wild game cooking. And very glad to be along with you once again. As I'm in the studio right now, it's raining. In fact, I got soaked as I walked from my truck across the parking lot into the studio, and I enjoyed every drop of it. Man, we needed some rain, and I know it didn't rain across the entire state, but here in our neck of the woods, we're getting a nice rain, which is wonderful for the folks who have their food plots in, right? It is that time of year. Starting to think about the fall hunting season, and I'm starting to think about it as well. It's only 1 month now before I head up to White River for a bear hunt. And then, of course, in September, I've got my bear hunt in the Newberry District. Down in October, I'm going down to Ohio. And, of course, deer hunting here in Michigan. So I'm starting to think that direction, starting to think, well, I better start shooting a little bit and make sure everything's dialed in. But I just can't make myself do it yet. Oh, I have to apologize. Before I switch gears here, I have to apologize. I have to apologize to all the bears in the Upper Peninsula. I made a bad comment about you guys and gals last week. We talked about a fly fisherman in the Yup being attacked by a bear. And the story was that this bear came out of the bush, tried to take a fish out of his hand or something like that, knocked him down. He hit his head, knocked himself out, and when he came to, he was in rough shape. Well, the DNR has since investigated that, both wildlife biologists and conservation officers, and they say we can't find any proof of it. So, UP Bears, I sincerely apologize for saying something bad about you. I have to be honest, it didn't sound quite right in the first place. I know if you get between a sow and cubs, you could have a problem, but I've spent an awful lot of time around bear, and black bear, that is, not grizzlies. I have no experience there at all, but black bears like we have here in Michigan. And though I have seen them act aggressive to the point of chomping their jaws at you and huffing at you and letting you know they weren't happy with you being there. 99% of the time, they don't want anything to do with you. So that I will never know what really happened there, but it appears it was not a bear attack. And again, I apologize to the UP Bears. Before I get into the hunting season, full swing though, I got some more fishing to do. And I've been out there every chance I get. Out on Saginaw Bay, my beloved Saginaw Bay. Listen, there are some great fisheries in this state. There are many wonderful fisheries in this state. We are blessed here in Michigan to have some world-class fishing for so many different species. But I admit, I talk about Saginaw Bay Walleye a lot because it's my home water. It's in my backyard. 20 minutes from my house, I can be on the boat. So that's where I fish. So it's only natural that somebody would talk about, when you're relating your experiences in the outdoors, that you would talk about the things that you do. And I had a couple of very interesting trips this week. I love that beloved skinny water, and people, I'm always hearing from people, hey, tell me more about that skinny water. What is skinny water? Is the skinny water bite still holding up? How long do you think it'll last? And I love that. I love talking about that. We had a northeast blow for a couple of days, which I was concerned it would blow a bunch of weeds in there. It did not, but what it did do was it blew some cold water in. It dropped the water temp 5 degrees, which means it should hold those fish in there just a few days longer. Come on. Lord and Mother Nature, which I know you're the same thing, please keep those fish in there for another 2 weeks. Please keep them in there for a month. Oh, that would be wonderful. I had an interesting trip, though. It was the last time out. It was a fundraiser for Real Men Wear Pink, which is breast cancer awareness and to fight breast cancer, and that's a cause that is very close to me. My mom's had breast cancer twice. My sister-in-law's had breast cancer. I know people have died from breast cancer, so whenever I can help raise funds for that cause, I do. Jason Wolverton, who at the time was with the Forward Corporation, was involved in a campaign to raise money. And I said, hey, I'll give you a fishing trip. Ross Elliott and Emil Rousseau bid on that. They were the high bidders. So last week, all three of those guys went fishing out on the Angler Quest with me. And we had a good day. I'm not saying we didn't have a good day. We had a good day. We got a dozen fish, which is not a great day, but talking with a lot of other people on the water, we did as well as most people and better than most. But the interesting part about this trip was I have never seen a day, in all of my years fishing Saginaw Bay Walleye, I have never seen a day like this that the fish would not hook up. We landed a dozen fish, dozen keeper walleye, but we had at least 20, maybe 2 dozen, and that's not an exaggeration at all, additional bites that didn't hook up. And I'm not talking about we had the fish on and we lost them. I'm talking about the tattle flag would drop down, the board, the offshore board, would drop back like a classic traditional walleye bite. And we'd go to pick up the rod, and the fish wasn't there. Again, it's not like we hooked them and lost them. They just did not hook up. At least 20 fish. At least 20 fish. We went to smaller baits to see if maybe they would have an easier time getting that in their mouth. That wasn't the problem. I sped up. It wasn't like I was going 2 miles an hour. I was going 2.5 miles an hour to begin with, so I sped up closer to 3. They still wouldn't hook up. I checked the hooks on the flicker shads, the flicker minnows. They were good and sharp. I sharpened some of them anyway. That didn't matter. Didn't make a difference. It was just a really weird day. Now, you can say, well, Avery, if you would have been running crawlers at 0.8 miles an hour, those fish probably would have hooked up. Well, maybe they would have. But then I would have been running crawlers at 0.8 miles an hour, and I would have been driving myself crazy. Very, very interesting day. Interesting day. And though landing fish is just a bonus, and we did have a wonderful day on the water, and we brought home some really nice fish, if I don't have a day like that again for a while, I would be okay. I did try something different on my boards. I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but I had been running the snapper releases on my boards as the front clip. And I like that because the line doesn't slide through them, and you can keep your slack for your tattle flag and yada, yada. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if not, you're going, I don't care. But the problem with the snapper releases is if you have to check a bait, or you get a fouled bait, or you get a small fish, or you get a weed, then you've got to bring that line across the others. And I'm running 4 or 5, 6 lines on a side. So you're asking for trouble. The thing about the orange clips, in theory, is that you can release them, they'll drop back out of the line, and they'll come in with a minimal mess, in theory. But so I went out and bought a bunch of new clips. I bought the orange clips, and I bought some new red clips to put on the back, OR19s, OR16s, I can never remember which one's which. I used the loop trick that Mark Romanack talks about online, where you twist the line, you put the twisted part of the line in there. I couldn't get them to release. I don't know if it was because they were new releases, or if I was doing something wrong. I think this shows some merit and has some promise. I just need to figure out how to do it. So who's coming up on this week's show? After the break, Ali Shakoor will join us. Ali is a tournament fisherman, a fisheries biologist, a researcher. He's involved in some very cool projects. Want to talk to him about that and his summertime fishery. Brent Pike from the Michigan Wildlife Council talking about their Here for Generations campaign. In hour number 2, Cory Mitrzyk of Ideal Northern Edge Food Plots. This is a good time to be putting in food plots, especially if you got some rain, and if your food plots are already in, you are really enjoying this rain. And then either Nick Green or Amy Trotter from MUCC will join us to talk about Proposal G, and maybe, if I can get it out of them, some talk about the consent decree negotiations. There are some very interesting things going on here. Not all of it, I think, good. We'll learn more about that. And then in our third hour, speaking of trolling and loops and OR12s and snapper releases and dive curves and all that stuff, Mark Romanack of Fishing 411. I'm telling you right now, he's going to get the coveted third segment. We're going to spend some time talking with Mark. And we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. That's coming up on this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show. By the way, my email address, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. You can always reach out to me with questions, comments, criticisms, suggestions. My website is mikeaveryoutdoors.com. Be sure to check that out, mikeaveryoutdoors.com. The email address, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. Ali Shakoor coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Alpena on WZTK, that's 105.7 FM. You can hear us in Battle Creek on WBCK 95.3 FM. And north of the bridge in the Sioux on News Talk 1400 WKNW. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Rapid River Knives. As always, I have a Rapid River knife in my pocket right now. Carry it all the time. In fact, I've had people say, hey, can I see? I hear you talk about these knives. Can I see your knife? So I pull it out and show them. And they go, oh, you're right. That is beautiful. They are. They are beautiful, handmade pieces of art that are also designed to be used. Chris Durson at Rapid River would be disappointed if you buy one of his knives and put it on a shelf or put it in a drawer. They're designed to be used. They make pocket knives. They make gutting knives. They make hatchets. They make axes. They make fillet knives. They make kitchen knives. And they're all handmade, again, by craftsmen in the UP. If you want to see something really special, stop by their showroom just outside of Rapid River on US 2. If you can't make it up, go to the website, rapidriverknifeworks.us, rapidriverknifeworks.us. You can order from the website. You can have them custom engraved if you want. Very, very cool. rapidriverknifeworks.us. I want to turn my attention now to a guy who I find absolutely fascinating. His name is Ali Shakoor. He is a tournament fisherman. He's a fisheries biologist. He's a fisheries researcher. And I've seen some very cool and interesting things he's been posting online lately. And, you know, Ali's so busy, he's hard to get a hold of. So when he has some time, I always say, Ali, join me on the show, please. And this week, our schedules were perfect, and he's with us on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Ali, welcome back. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on once again. Yeah, my schedule is pretty hectic right now, but I'm always so excited to come on your show and try to get it in absolutely anytime I can.
Well, and I appreciate that. What are you working on now, Ali?
Well, right now I got a couple things going. You mentioned some of the pictures I've been posting. You know, and again, I kind of like to post those pictures to give folks an idea of kind of the fun things that go on. You know, as a scientist, I get to see those things, but a lot of people who aren't, you know, in the club, so to speak, or don't have access to journals don't get to see those kind of things. So I was helping out a lab mate do some feeding studies. So we were raising some fish that we got from Lake St. Clair. I haven't said what kind of fish those were. My post, those are actually Lake St. Clair perch. So I've raised them from eggs up past the fry stage right now, and kind of posting some videos of the development from being just fertilized until hatching, and they're starting to feed now. I'm going to be posting some videos of those today.
What is that process? I mean, how do you do that? How do you get eggs and then grow them in a lab?
It's pretty simple. We get those eggs from the Lake St. Clair station. We get them in. We're using just regular water, dechlorinated water, so we'll bubble it for a couple of days. We'll actually take the chlorine out from the water treatment. And at that point, it's just a matter of water temperature. They need to be, have so many thermal units, so much temperature at so much time until they hatch. So you have to have really consistent temperatures. If you have too high a jump or too low a drop, all at once, you can have some developmental issues, and, it can be lethal in some instances. So it's all about water temperature, water quality. We're taking water quality measurements every single day. I'll mention it when we do these kind of studies that once you get those eggs, you do not have a life. You are married to those things. You have to go out there every day. I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. Oh, my God, did I put the aerator back in? Oh, my God, did I do this? It's funny. We actually ordered a baby monitor the other night to put it in there. But, yeah, it's just about kind of measuring water quality and just keeping an eye on them really close and watching the development.
And why do you do that? What's the purpose?
Well, the purpose here, like I said, this is kind of a feeding study we're doing. So, we're all familiar with zebra mussels, dry sennets, now quagga mussels in the area. And it's documented that certain fish will eat them. Round gobies will eat them. Sheephead will eat them. Other fish, shellcrackers or red ears will eat them. But, what you see in some instances is that some fish will eat them and it can be a detriment to them. So you have these larval perch, and zebra mussel or dry sennet veligers are so small that they're able to be eaten by larval perch. And I have some really cool pictures I'm going to post. So these fish are 6-7 millimeters long, and already they're feeding on dry sennet veligers, or the larval form of zebra mussels or quagga mussels.
Wow.
And it can impact their intestinal tract and cause some issues with them, their growth rates, because they're not getting the nutrients they would get if they were eating rotifers or something else. So, it's just to see if there's environmental impacts at different levels of the food web, because we only think about adult fish and direct interaction. So it's really cool stuff, kind of foundational work that needs to be done.
It is cool, and I whenever I think about you and your research and your fishing, the insight that gives you is fascinating, because I would imagine when you head out on the water, you're looking at a day on the water from so many different perspectives, and you have so much knowledge and so much experience and so much insight that us weekend warriors just don't have.
Yeah, but, yes, it has helped me. Yes, it has helped me place well in some tourneys. Also, I feel like sometimes it's giving me too much to think about. There are days where you trust your gut and you go out and you just fish. You have to have those days also, but it's good to have that frame of reference. It's good to have my fishing informed by my science, but it's also good, more importantly, to have my science informed not just by my fishing, but by the fishing of other people. So if I run into you at the launch and I say, hey, Mike, how'd you do? Where'd you fish? And tell me what you saw. That's extremely important too. And I do a lot of this stuff to make people realize that they play an important role. Citizen science is really important, being aware of your environment and changes that you see, because a lot of times you're going to see those changes before the folks who are actually out there to monitor and then to try to catch those changes. So yeah, the stuff's important. I love to see it, and it does inform my fishing, but that's not the only aspect that I really enjoy from it.
You bring up a very interesting point. You, as a researcher, as a fisheries biologist, I mean, you eat, sleep, live, breathe this kind of stuff. However, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of your time is spent in the lab. If you talk to some old retired guy who's out there on the water every day, I mean, he sees this. He sees the changes day to day. Yeah, that insight would be valuable. And I appreciate the fact that you are interested in that. And sometimes I feel like maybe our biologists at a state level don't take that type of experience or knowledge into account.
Yeah, you got to get me in a little bit of trouble here. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. For instance, I have these discussions, and I've actually had some pretty heated discussions. One was in an interview for a fellowship where I was kind of had a back and forth with someone who was a director of a social media and outreach of a pretty large governmental agency, and we were talking about science communication. And I said, yeah, you have science communication, you have blogs, you have this, and you have that. I said, but the person who lives on the shores of Lake St. Clair and sees stuff washing up on their shoreline and everything, they're not looking for that stuff. They can see what they can see every day. And you have to come to them and let them know what's going on and ask them what's going on. If I pull up to the Detroit River and there's someone out there who's been pulling a wire on that river for 70 years, you best believe I'm going to talk. So I'm going to just say, hey, just tell me a story. Tell me what you've seen over the years. That stuff is important, and it can help direct, biologists and scientists to look at other things and just to have a different viewpoint. And then you get where the people who you are serving, because you are serving the people because they're using the resource. So I feel like sometimes there can be a spoke missing in that wheel between science and the people who we're supposed to be serving.
Well, I'm going to let you off the hook for now, but I will just say that coming up in our second hour, I'm going to be talking with the folks at MUCC about this concept, Proposal G, and maybe how we've gotten away from sound scientific wildlife management and lean more towards this whole concept of social science. So we'll leave it at that. Ali, this Southeast Michigan fishery, the resource, is kind of your sweet spot, I feel like. Lake St. Clair, Lake Erie, Detroit River. How has that resource, how has that fishery changed and evolved since you were a kid coming up?
Oh, man, first of all, water quality. I came up fishing Lake Erie in the 80s with my dad, and, you have very poor water quality, water clarity. Weed growth was limited to nearshore areas. With the introduction of zebra mussels, quagga mussels, water clarity is a lot deeper. You get weeds growing out in the 20, 30 feet. Other areas of Great Lake, hell, you go up to Green Bay, which I also fished as a kid, and you can actually sight fish walleye in 35 feet of water at times up in Door County, and that was never the case in the past. So, water clarity has improved drastically. Water quality, of course, has improved drastically. And the food web has changed with the introduction of round gobies and some other organisms. So, there has been a change. You hate to see the introduction of invasive species, but some species have, after a period of time, have improved, and some have not, and that's something we have to deal with this new normal that everyone talks about. But I feel like they're in great shape. Of course, there are threats that are still out there, but I'll say it. I'll advocate for this area every single time you ask me. We live in the outdoorsman's paradise here in this part of the country, this part of the state. And it's a great resource.
Well, we were so concerned about mussels. They were going to destroy our fishery. They haven't, fortunately. Gobies, the same thing. They become a food source. Are we too concerned about aquatic invasive species? Maybe Asian carp, and I'm just throwing this out here. I'm not saying I want it to happen, but God forbid if they did make it into the Great Lakes, maybe they'd find a niche in the food chain too, Ali.
Well, eventually they will find a niche, but the question is, what are the resultant impacts on the rest of that food chain? Of course, they're going to come in. They're going to compete with native species. I actually just did something with Drew Youngdike over at National Wildlife Federation. We were out fishing. That should be coming out soon on Michigan Out of Doors. But there's a couple of papers out there. One I was a co-author on where we actually modeled the introduction of invasive carp into Lake Erie, Saginaw Bay, Muskegon Lake, in a Green Bay, a few other bodies of water, and the effects on the food web. I think we projected it out about 200 years. And there's a little bit of consternation in there. There are some species who are going to do well. There are some species theoretically who won't do so well. Some species will be able to feed on those invasive carp. But they just grow so fast. Some, the gapes, they'll get bigger, too big to be eaten. So, there'll be some issues, but some fish possibly could do well. Should we be concerned? Yeah, I think we should be concerned because those fish are non-native. They did not evolve in this part of the world, in this ecosystem. So there definitely will be some negative impacts that will be felt if they were introduced.
Ali, hang tight. We got to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. We're talking with Ali Shakoor, fisheries biologist, researcher, tournament angler, hardcore angler. You can learn more about him on his website, alishakoorfishing.com. That's Ali, A-L-I, Shakoor, S-H-A-K-O-O-R. alishakoorfishing.com. Lots more with Ali coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Traverse City on WTCM. That's 580 AM. On the other side of the state in Tawas, WIOS, 1480 AM, 106.9 FM. And let's go north of the bridge. Let's go to Escanaba, the Riviera of the North. WCHT, 600 AM, 95.3 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by the Linwood Beach Marina and Campground. Linwood Beach can be your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination and your Mid-Michigan Tracker and Angler Quest headquarters. Check them out online at linwoodbeachmarina.com, linwoodbeachmarina.com. Linwood Beach will be the site of the first annual Angler Quest Owners Tournament coming up Saturday the 23rd. If you own an Angler Quest and want to become involved, check out the website anglerquestpontoons.com, anglerquestpontoons.com. Right now we're talking fishing with Ali Shakoor. Before the break, I gave you some bad information. I said go to alishakoorfishing.com. I should say on Facebook and Instagram, do a search on Ali Shakoor Fishing. Ali's with us right now on the phone line. Ali, between this research at all, have you had any time to get out in the water? Have you been fishing at all?
Yeah, I have. I just haven't been putting a lot on social media as far as fishing. I've been kind of tied up with my daughter graduating and leaving for school in about a month or so here. But yeah, fishing's been great. Lake Erie has been hot for walleye. If any of the folks out there are interested in steelhead, the steelhead bite is getting really hot. Down in Ohio, from Lorain all the way back to the islands. You don't have to go all the way to Lorain to get those steelhead out on the line. But there were some really big ones. My buddy, Chris McCulley, who's an outstanding rigger, also got one that was over 13 pounds.
Wow.
3 or 4 days ago. So the steelhead bite is picking up. The deep water walleye bite out around the islands is really getting hot also. Lake St. Clair smoke and the perch bite is picking up. And the walleye fish is going good out there as well.
I thought you had to go over to the Ontario side to get steelhead. Obviously not.
No, and I'm a big fan. I love going over to Wheatley and Erio to chase those steelhead. But there is an outstanding steelhead bite. We get them in the rivers in the spring. We'll actually go up and troll in the rivers. But out deep, like I said, out around the Ohio-Canadian line right now is really good. My tournament partner did really well out there about 4 days ago. He had like a 3 or 4 man limit of both steelhead and walleye. Good size for both.
Wow.
There's a good steelhead bite out around Peely and north of the Bass Islands and Kelly. So, no, you do not have to go all the way to Ontario to get those steelhead.
Are you targeting those chrome fish, or do you catch them right in there with your walleye rigs?
Well, we're targeting them. We're actually catching the walleye as we're targeting the steelhead.
Huh.
So we're pulling spoons, we're ripping spoons fast on lead core and dipsies out there. Number 1 dipsies with rings, and we're actually going out looking for steelfish, and there's just so many walleye in the system. They're out there mixed in as well in that cooler water.
And what a good day that would be.
It is a fun day. There's nothing like, I love dipsy fish. It's my favorite way to fish. I love to see that rod start bucking, but it's an extremely fun day. So if you're interested, get down there. To go down there with your favorites, Michigan Stinger spoons or whatever you like to pull, and the fishing is just fantastic right now.
And when is the next stop for you on the tournament trail?
I am headed to Lake Oahe in Mobridge, South Dakota on the Missouri River. I'm heading out on the 27th, so that's for the National Team Championship. So 200 of the very best walleye teams, so 400, fishermen from clubs all around the country. You had to qualify for this event. We qualified by actually winning out there last year in the Masters Walleye Circuit. So 200 teams. We fish for 2 days, get cut to 25 for championship day. So we're going to go out there and try to break down 160 some odd miles of river.
And that's a whole different ball game than fishing Lake Erie, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, the structure is incredible. We were catching fish. We were casting last time. We were throwing shiver minnows, and we were catching fish. Day 1 of the tournament, we got our big fish in 15 feet. On day 2, when we caught our winning fish, we were actually casting in 50, 55 feet. You get walleyes deep as 100, 110 feet of water. It is an incredible fishery. There's salmon in there, so it's a cold water fishery also. It is completely different. And I always suggest you really want to improve as a fisherman. It doesn't have to be a tournament, but just kind of get off Erie. We're blessed here with the fishing. When you get to see some other places and do some other kind of fishing, it'll round you out.
I hear what you're saying there, but like in my case, and I was talking about this in the opening segment, 20 minutes from my front door, I can be on my boat on Saginaw Bay. It's real hard to walk away from that, to give that up.
It is extremely hard, and I know exactly where you're coming from. I'm kind of talking about maybe the competitive, folks out there who want to kind of test their mettle, or maybe they feel like there's something missing in their game. Some people just want to be, not saying that you're not all around if you fish here. That's not what I'm saying at all. But people just like to kind of go out and spread their wings a little bit. But believe me, I am 25 minutes from Monroe, 15 minutes from Elizabeth Park. I'm 25 minutes from St. Clair. I'm an hour and something from Saginaw Bay. It is extremely hard for me to even go to Green Bay or other places that I love because, like you said, I can hitch up my boat and in 20 minutes have fish in a boat. It's incredible here.
We are blessed. I don't care, especially for walleye, but salmon, trout, muskies, steelhead, bass. We never talk about bass. Man, we've got some great fisheries here. Don't
leave out the panfish, perch. I grew up, there's incredible panfish, bluegill, crappie on Lake St. Clair, Detroit River, even Lake Erie. We target them through the ice down in West Bay. We are incredibly blessed. You'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere, and I mean anywhere, where the fishing is as good as it is here for so many different species.
Ali, always a pleasure. Good luck on the tournament trail. I'll be watching your research. You can find Ali on social media. He's on Facebook and Instagram as Ali Shakoor Fishing. Ali, we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I'll come post some of those pictures on your site as also so folks can see some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'll be looking for it. You do that and I'll share them. Ali Shakoor Fishing on Facebook and Instagram. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, we'll wrap up this opening hour with Brent Pike of the Michigan Wildlife Council. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine Show on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan, including WKYO in Carroll, 1360 AM. Also in Carroll, WIDL 92.1 FM. You can hear us in Houghton Lake on 98.5 WUPS. And let's go north of the bridge. Let's go to Marquette, WDMJ 1320 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by MUCC's On the Ground program. OTG is a program to improve habitat for fish and wildlife across the state. For details, check out the Michigan United Conservation Club's website. It's MUCC.org. That's MUCC.org. And if you're signing up to become an MUCC member, like I have, you can use the promo code Mike, all caps MIKE, and save 25%. That's MUCC.org. While you're online, of course, my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and then head on over to HereForMIOutdoors.org. HereForMIOutdoors.org is the website of the Michigan Wildlife Council. That's a group I've been working with for a few years now. I think they're doing a wonderful job. They are promoting hunting and fishing to people in our state who may not be involved in the lifestyle. They're educating those people as to how important what we do is. Brent Pike is a member of the Michigan Wildlife Council, and he joins us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Brent, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great. What's going on in your world?
Oh, as the owner of a small business that specializes in upland bird hunting equipment, we're kind of getting stocked up and ready for the start of the season, and kind of shifting gears with the Wildlife Council as well, trying to, we'll start going from our fishing, looks to more of the hunting stuff to keep, like you said earlier, to educate folks out there about, what conservation dollars do and what conservation actually means. It doesn't mean just, conserving things. It means utilizing these resources and capturing dollars from those resources and getting people outdoors and keeping wildlife populations in check and healthy.
And I know you folks there on the council, you are very concerned about documenting and keeping track of the impact of your message, and you're making a difference, Brent.
Yeah, we really are. I mean, if you look at, 65% of Michiganders understand that wildlife management is necessary for thriving wildlife populations. That's up from like 39% when we started this a few years ago. So, I mean, the message is getting out there to people, and people are understanding. And, there's other states out there that are trying to emulate what we're doing here because, I think we are making a difference to to the folks out there that, quite frankly, may not, benefit from as much as the hunters do, but they do go to the ballot box, and that's why we need to make sure that we keep the foot on the gas to keep these folks, informed and educated, and so they can make good decisions when they go to the ballot box and they don't vote down things like dove hunting and wolf hunting and things like that.
And you said you're starting to make a shift kind of from a fishing theme more into the fall hunting theme, but you're not targeting the hardcore hunters. That's a distinction that we need to make very clear. The hardcore hunters and anglers, we already get it. You're trying to reach people who maybe didn't grow up in the lifestyle like we did.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people misunderstand what the Wildlife Council is doing. I mean, we're not even really trying to actively recruit these folks. I mean, we're just trying to make them aware that, hey, this is a lifestyle that a lot of Michiganders enjoy, a lot of out-of-state people enjoy, and come to our state to recreate and to spend money here. But just to try to let these people know that, hey, there's nothing wrong with going out and shooting a deer and then butchering it and eating it, and grouse and walleye and all these other things out there. That this is a good thing. This is not something that unfortunately we've had Bambi and these other things out there that have kind of made hunters look out to be these barbaric people that go out there and just kill for fun. And the more people understand that hunters are out there, they're procuring dinner for themselves, and fishermen are procuring dinner for themselves, and that's a great thing that hey, they're out there and maybe taking some stress off of your paying at the grocery store right now with the high inflation rates.
You talked about being in the outdoor industry. I know you're a hardcore upland bird hunter. The dog training season is open now too, isn't it, Brent?
It is, yes. That opened up on July 8th. From reports I'm getting from a lot of friends and stuff like that, there's certainly it seems to be a decent hatch, but the hatch does seem to be late. So, I mean, most of the guys I know that are running dogs right now are guys that have pretty well-trained dogs that, can hold them back from, if they run into a young brood of grouse or something like that. But, the bear hunting and rabbit hunting, those guys are at it as well, too. And certainly, it's nice to see people out there, using Michigan's great natural resources this time of year, even though it's hot and buggy, but it's better than sitting inside behind a computer, right?
Absolutely. The website is hereformioutdoors.org. And listen, Brent, I'll give you a chance to plug your business. What's your company website?
We are Pike Gear, www.pykegear.com, and we specialize in USA-made upland bird hunting technical equipment. So we use, waterproof breathable fabric, stretch nylon, polyester components, so it's lightweight, breathable, durable, and all the stuff's made right here in the USA.
Excellent. Keep up the good work there. And on the Michigan Wildlife Council, the website for those folks here for mioutdoors.org. We'll take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back in hour number 2, we're going to talk about food plots. Cory Mitrzyk of Ideal Northern Edge Food Plots. As we're in the studio right now, I look out the window. I think it's still raining. If not, at least we got a real nice rain earlier, so that's good news for the food plot people and everybody else. Also, we'll talk with either Nick Green or Amy Trotter of MUCC about Proposal G and much more. That's coming up in hour number 2 of Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Tree Stands, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show. Right here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network. Heard on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. Yes, indeed, this is first and foremost a radio show. It is recorded, produced, syndicated, distributed as a radio show. And I say that to make the distinction between a radio show and a podcast. And maybe this doesn't even matter to you, but it does to me. So I got to get it off my chest. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Michigan-based outdoor-related podcasts. And there are some very, very good ones. But there aren't many syndicated outdoor radio shows. And I do think the best way to listen to the content of this program, if you can, is on your local radio station. Your local radio station has your local news and sports and weather and even commercials. Maybe there's a big sale you want to take advantage of. So I think that's the best way. Plus, the radio stations get the content before the podcast is uploaded. Some people will say, well, the podcast dropped. No, my podcasts get uploaded, and then you download them. I don't know where this term, the podcast, dropped from. I don't get that, but I'm getting off track. But if you want to listen to the podcast version of the Outdoor Magazine radio show, isn't it nice to know that option is out there? You can hear it on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. You can hear it on my Facebook page. You can hear it on Amazon Music, Audible, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Player FM, Deezer, Odyssey, and even YouTube. And I didn't even give you the whole list. Anywhere you can hear a podcast, you can hear the podcast version of the Outdoor Magazine radio show. But speaking of podcasts, I do love podcasting. I don't want to give you the impression that I don't. Podcasting is a great way for you. If you want to reach an audience, if you have a topic you want to talk about, if you have an idea, a concept, if you want to get something off your chest, if you want to educate people about something, podcasting is a perfect way to do it. You don't need a radio studio. You don't need a TV studio. All you need is your phone. Honestly, you could start a podcast with your phone. And I would encourage you, if you feel compelled to do that, do it. I also do podcasts that are, not the radio show. I do a monthly podcast for offshore tackle, primal tree stands, polar craft boats, and angler quest boats. And when we're done here recording this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show, we will do this month's Angler Quest podcast with Mr. Angler Quest himself, Brad Dupuis. So I would encourage you to look for those. Again, as I'm sitting here in the studio midweek, it's raining. Oh. And I hope it rained in your part of the state. But here in my part of the world, it's still raining, and it is wonderful. And I was thinking it would be even better if I had some food plots in the ground. Cory Mitrzyk is with Ideal Northern Edge Food Plots, and I will admit, I did butcher Cory's name in the first hour. So if you heard me pronounce it in a different way, I apologize. It is Cory Mitrzyk. And Cory's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Hey, Cory, buddy, welcome back. How you doing?
Good morning.
I bet you're glad to see some rain.
Oh, she's raining. We need rain. That is one definite thing we've been waiting for, and it's here.
Yeah.
Right now, it's prime time for food plots, and we got the water. And now we just need some sunny days and some time to get the seed into the ground, and we should all be golden.
Yeah. Well, the timing on this rain is perfect, right? Because if you had to pick a couple of weeks to put in food plots, wouldn't these next couple be right there?
Yeah, the second week of July all the way through about the second week of August, depending on what you're putting in. Your brassicas, it's a prime time here from now 4 weeks through. If you're getting into clover and your alfalfa, you want to start. You always want to plant a clover or alfalfa with a month that starts with an A. So you got April and you got August. Those are the supreme times to get your perennial plots put in.
Well, I love to hear you give that little tip there, that little advice, because to be honest with you, as a guy who I grew up on a farm, I grew up pulling plows and stuff like that, but it's been so many years since I did it, I don't remember. And right. I'm a little intimidated by this whole food plot thing. It's almost overwhelming, Cory.
Well, it just depends on the person that's helping you. I mean, advice is what's going to make it or break it. I mean, key times like right now with moisture is, it boils down to this is going to be our month, and we have the moisture, so we should be all sitting pretty good. Especially people that already have their plots in, especially the farmers with the commodity market, the soybeans, the corn, everything was going to start shriveling up and dying. I mean, it's good for all of us across the board. This rain, this is like a $1 million rain.
And when you say that, that's not an exaggeration, is it?
No, corn was starting to twist at the tops. I mean, I have a no-till drill, and I used the no-till drill last week to put in soybeans and corn, and the ground from just running a cutter blade would actually split like a quarter inch. Like you could see the seed from just putting a little slice in the ground. That's how dry it was, especially 2 days later. I was like, holy cow.
Wow. Well, you are your main business, I guess, is the ag business. You own Standish Milling. So how did you get over into Ideal Northern Food Plots? What was the reason to get into the food plot business?
Well, it was 17 years ago. I just wanted to make it easy. I tried to think of a way to make it easy for people putting in a food plot, especially if you're putting in brassicas like a turnip. There's 220,000 seeds in 1 pound. And that 1 pound can actually go a really long ways compared. So what I did is I color code all my seeds so you can see it, so you don't overplant and you don't underplant, especially when it comes to a turnip, a radish, a rutabaga, a kale. all those plants are like an umbrella plant. They go up and then they have a canopy, they're leaves. And they need room to establish their actual bulb, which is your turnip or your rutabaga or your radish. And when you overplant, your seeds are only going to be purple. They're going to be, your leaves are going to be purple. They'll be yellow if you overplant. If you don't overplant, you're going to have a nice sized softball turnip. You're going to have a nice foot-long radish. You're going to have a beautiful rutabaga. I mean, your kale is going to just look amazing. I mean, you're going to have big, broad leaves compared to small, stubby plants.
Let's go back to the basics. I mean, the very basics. Why put in a food plot in the first place? It's work. It costs you money. It takes up your time. Why is it even worth it, Cory?
For me, I just enjoy being in the outdoors. It gives us an opportunity to better our chances come season. It gives us a reason to get out of the house. It just gives us some time to be in Mother Nature, the outdoors. The outdoors is what it's all about. It's not always supposed to be about the work. It's supposed to be about enjoying time with friends, family, hunting partners, whoever it may be, just to get away, break loose, just have some fun. I mean, in some aspects, yeah, it's work, but if it's done right and at the right time, the outcome is what we're all looking for. We're looking for that nice buck, or just to be able to have a food plot even in your backyard that you can watch Mother Nature from your kitchen. I mean, it's all about just enjoying the outdoors.
So how big does a food plot have to be effective?
Food plot, it's what you have and the amount of land. I mean, you can either have a kill plot, which is a plot that is in between a bedding area and maybe it might be a cornfield or a soybean field that a farmer has. It's to get the deer up and moving earlier. I mean, you're trying to get them in that transition point. You want to have something just to get them to stop, maybe to give you a 30-second shot. They might even just browse right through it, going to where their destination is. But it's just to get. I mean, you can have a quarter acre, you can have an acre, you can have a 10-acre plot, and it just depends on the equipment that you have, the availability, the time. There's just so much that goes into it. But like I said, the main outcome is just be outdoors and enjoy it.
Hang tight, Cory. I got to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. We're talking with Cory Mitrzyk of Ideal Northern Edge Food Plots, the website idealnorthernedge.com, idealnorthernedge.com. this whole concept of food plotting, I have so many more questions. In fact, I hope we have enough time to get those questions in. But I will tell you, and Cory, don't answer, but be thinking about this. My first question for you after the break is, I understand that in the North Country or the UP, yeah, we might want to put in a food plot. But the southern part of the state, where we're surrounded by ag crops, why does a food plot work there? So that's my first question after the break. For Cory Mitrzyk, again, the website, idealnorthernedge.com, idealnorthernedge.com. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Lansing on WILS. That's 1320 AM. You can hear us in Muskegon on WKBZ, 1090 AM. And in the Thumb in Sandusky on WMIC, 660 AM, 95.3 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, AR style, highly accurate, tough, and dependable hunting rifles that could change the way you hunt. They're made in Lansing. How cool is that? The website, BrentonUSA.com, BrentonUSA.com. I have a Brenton USA 350 Legend. I have not shot it yet. I picked it up about a month ago or so, and I told the guys then, I said, look, I'm not going to get a chance to get my hands on this and really work with it until the fishing slows down. That's going to happen here very soon, and I'm looking forward to getting that 350 Legend out on the range. I will use that for my Michigan bear hunt. Now, I understand that people say, well, it's not the ideal bear gun. I think it's going to be a great bear gun. I didn't buy it as a bear gun. I bought it as a multi-species gun that I could get a lot of use out of, including whitetails. And speaking of whitetails, if you have access to property where you can put in food plots, this is a great time to be doing it, especially with the rain. Cory Mitrzyk is with Ideal Northern Edge Food Plots. Their website, idealnorthernedge.com, idealnorthernedge.com. Cory, before the break, I posed a question about, I get it. You'd want to put a food plot in northern Michigan or the UP where there's not a lot of farming around. But in southern Michigan, where we're surrounded by farmers' crops, what good does a food plot do in a situation like that?
Well, what I recommend to people in situations like that is there's so many different varieties of seed that are in all of our blends. And I offer a quarter-acre size bag. So say that you have an acre food plot and you don't know what the deer are going to be attracted to. It's just like us. We don't want to eat a hamburger every single day. We don't want to eat a steak every day. I mean, we like to mix things up. And I feel it's the same in a whitetail's mind, that they want different things. They want variety. They're a browsing animal. I mean, as they walk through the 100-acre lots of woods, they're eating ferns, they're eating leaves, they're eating branches, they're eating whatever they walk by. So that being said, say that you got corn on one side of you got soybeans on the other side of you, and you don't know. So you got an acre plot, you break it up into 4 sections. And this may be your first year at putting in a food plot, so we got to try something to see what the deer are attracted to at different times of the year. So I tell them, we'll break the food plot into 4 sections, we'll put 4 different things in. And as they hunt through the season, they see, and I tell them, I say, just know what you're seeing, so the next year we know what they were attracted to the previous year, so you know what to do the following year. So you can put a turnip plot, quarter-acre turnip plot, you can put a quarter-acre radish plot, you could put a quarter-acre of clover in, which is going to be your perennial, so you're going to have something come the following spring. And then you can put a collard in, or you can put alfalfa, or whatever it may be, but just to give them a variety to see what they're attracted to, because all the plant species that are in all of our blends have different maturities. Say that turnip matures in 62 days. Radish might not be till 68. Clover, I mean, once it gets the head on it, not saying they're not attracted to it, but they'll still munch on it. And then you got your alfalfa and whatever it may be, but a variety for your first year to get an idea of what works in your area is kind of what I recommend to most of our clients.
You got my attention with that 1/4 acre bag. That makes a lot of sense to me too, because rather than worry about, the rate that you would plant that at, if you got one of your bags and you got a 1/4 acre, you put this bag on the 1/4 acre and it's the right rate. It's the right amount.
Right. And that's why I color coat the seed so you can see it, because I've had people before, even myself, I struggled. Without the color, you can't see the seed because a turnip seed is black. You throw a black seed on black dirt, it's impossible to see. And most people, they say, well, I can't see it yet, I'll put a little bit more on. And being in, like brassicas, that's the worst thing to do. You can go through after, if you got bare spots, you can go through after the fact and spread seed. And they're pretty strong, hard-shelled seeds that they'll take germination just laying on the top of the soil if the soil was worked before you planted it. So, I mean, that's another option. If it's not perfect the first time, you can go back through and you can broadcast seed 2 weeks later or whatever it may be, and you'll get some green up.
All right, so somebody's listening to this. They say, man, this is the year. I'm going to start putting in food plots. What is the very first thing you do? How do we get started?
Soil sample. We need to know where your soil is. We need to know where your NPK, nitrogen, phos, and potash, and we need to know where your pH is at. A good pH is anywhere from 6.5 to 7. Your nitrogen, your phos, and your potash, I can't tell until you send in a soil sample. And then what we do is we send it in, we test it for 2 different things. It costs $25. We can test it for a legume, which is a perennial, or a clover, or alfalfa, and then I can test it for all your brassicas, which would be your turnips, radishes, kale, collards, all that. So I can get you a breakdown of what we need for that first plot right off the bat, and that's the most crucial. I mean, if we don't have the right food to eat, we struggle for the nutrients. And a plant's the same way. It needs its nutrients to grow and to create the bulbs and to just survive.
And then, okay, after the soil sample, do we go in there then with Roundup and kill everything off? So we starting with
yeah. I mean, so the first thing is your soil sample. Next, you're going to want to go in. You're going to want to spray it with Roundup. Or if you don't prefer Roundup, you can just go through and till your soil. I mean, it's going to take a couple times, but every time you till your soil, there's always dormant weed seeds that lay in the soil. It's almost impossible to not get a weed seed when you rototill, because unless you control your rototiller right at about 1 inch, where you're not disturbing 6 inches down and bringing up, it's just like rocks. Rocks come up in fields every single year, and that's from the frost in the ground. And it's the same thing with weed seeds. When you rototill it one time, you're bringing up seeds that's never had the moisture and the heat to actually grow. And then you bring them up and you're like, whoa, what is that? What's growing? And the only way, like I was saying, to work your weed seed out is to just rototill it. And it's going to take a couple times, but eventually you'll get the weed seed count under control, or you can go with the Roundup and you can just fry the field.
I like what you're saying too about the rototiller, because I'm thinking, well, you know, I don't have access to a tractor anymore. I don't even have a quad that I could pull a little disc behind it, but a rototiller I could throw in the back of the truck and I can get that in anywhere.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of people that still use a handheld rototiller. I mean, the food plots aren't huge, but they're 1/4 acre. They're more of a kill plot, people would call them. So, I mean, a hand rototiller works just as good as a big rototiller. But when you brought up a disc, I mean, a lot of people try to disc in a turnip. And when they try to disc in a turnip, you got to remember that disc is going 4, 6, 8 inches into the ground, turning the soil. And then when you have your seed laying up top and you roll it 6 inches, that seed, you might not see that seed for 2 years. It's a hard shell seed. So it can lay dormant, and maybe 2 years later you go rototill and you never put turnips in, and poof, now you got turnips. And I've had people do that with discs. I've had them do it with rototillers as well. If you're using a rototiller or using a disc to plant seed after you've laid it on the top of the soil, there's a good chance if you go too deep, that seed will not grow.
All right, so let's talk about perennials versus annuals. I mean, it would seem to me that you would want to put everything in perennials because, number one, you plant it once and you're good for a few years, so it's less cost and less work. Why even put in annuals?
Well, most of your annuals are going to be bulbs. So you're going to have, like I said, your turnips, your 7-top turnips, your rutabagas, your radishes. And I feel a lot of those plants for the fall as an attractant is in the fall time, deer eat ferns. I mean, if you walk through the woods in midsummer, like right now, you can see where the deer eat the tops of the ferns right off. And I feel they are attracted to ferns heavily because of the water content that is actually in the stem and the actual fern itself. And when all the plants start to die in your timber, if they don't have a good water source, they're going to go to a plant that has some kind of water content to it. A turnip has a lot of water in it. Radish has a lot of water in it. And I feel that helps with your water content and your water ability, not ability, but the word I'm looking for. I lost it.
Well, I hear what you're saying, though. It goes back to giving them a variety. Put a variety of things out there and let them tell you what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a perennial is going to be there that fall and all year, all spring and all summer. But when you come out of winter, that next spring is where your perennials really go a long way. Because you got clover and you have alfalfa that's coming up as soon as the grass starts to green up. And that's good protein value for the does, for the lactation, for the milk, the buck horn growth, antler development, just anything that they can get coming out of a Michigan winter, right, early spring, is always beneficial for them.
Gotcha.
So
I got you. Listen, Cory, I got to let you go because I'm out of time, but I'm on your website right now, idealnorthernedge.com. It looks like it's a one-stop shop for all things food plots. I would encourage people to go there, idealnorthernedge.com, idealnorthernedge.com. Cory Mitrzyk, appreciate your time. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, Amy Trotter of MUCC with a couple of very interesting questions that she is prepared to answer right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine Show in Sheboygan on Big Country Gold, WCBY, 1240 AM, 100.7 FM. You can hear us in Flint on Sports Extra, 1330 WTRX. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Newberry, WNBY, 1450 AM, where I will be bear hunting this fall in the Newberry District in the third season. I can't wait. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Versa Skins, Michigan-based Versa Skins, high-quality, well-built hunting clothes with a little bit of a twist. Owner Paul Perrone has come up with a wonderful concept. Just change the skin for the season you're in. Rather than buy all these different sets of hunting clothes, buy one set and then change the camo pattern by snapping on and zipping on an outer layer, and it takes just a minute to do that. Check them out online at versaskins.com. versaskins.com. That's versaskins.com. While you are online, of course, my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. And then I would encourage you to head on over to my friends at Michigan United Conservation Club's website, their website, MUCC.org. MUCC.org. Amy Trotter is the executive director of MUCC. Now, normally here on the show, I end up talking with their chief information officer, Nick Green, and I enjoy those conversations very much. But when I get a chance to talk to Amy, I jump on that opportunity, and she has freed up her schedule for a few minutes today for us. And Amy Trotter, I appreciate it. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Very good. Thanks, Mike.
So listen, I got a little heads up of a couple of things that you're prepared to talk about, and I'm very excited about opening up this door here. Number one, something that has been coming up a lot lately in conservation and hunting and fishing circles, and it's the concept of Proposal G, which we approved as Michigan voters several years ago, which said sound scientific wildlife management will be the way we do things. Lately, it seems like we've been getting away from that, and it seems like social science has been playing a bigger role as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the key question with Proposal G, in addition to sound science certainly, is the question of the Natural Resources Commission and their authority. So we wanted to make sure that they had exclusive authority over the taking of game, and made sure that within statute, that to the greatest extent practical, they're using sound science in doing that. And this is a method that has been around for 100 years now, to really try to insulate some of our natural resource decision as it relates to fish and game, to insulate them from the politics of the day. It's not perfect, we know that, but it is at least bipartisan, and it's a group less influenced, I would say, by politics compared to our elected officials in the legislature or in the executive branch.
Couldn't the argument be made, though, that the NRC are politicians themselves because they're appointed by an elected politician?
That argument has always been around. Certainly, again, it's not perfect, but it is required to be bipartisan. So no more than 4 of the 7 commissioners can be from any one political party. So that provides at least some check and balance to it. And they have terms that cross over different administrations. So you'll still have, for example, Governor Snyder appointees serving alongside Governor Whitmer's appointees. So, we believe that, again, it's not perfect, we understand, but it at least provides some check and balance from any one administration trying to take over.
Well, and seeing some news releases from you folks, and I think this was addressed at the convention here a few weeks ago, there is a concern, it appears to me from the outside, that MUCC is concerned that maybe we're not in the right place. We're not where we should be right now.
Yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, I wasn't here at MUCC in 1996. And in fact, I was only 16, so I couldn't even vote on Proposal G. But, be that as it may, what happened during Proposal G is we passed the statute, that talked about the commission and sound scientific principles. What we didn't do as a society, the legislature, or anybody else at that time, was delete and clean up some old statute. So there's a section in state law that still gives the DNR authority over certain things like hunting seasons, quotas, and units, basically geographic boundaries of how we, determine where our wildlife management units are. And apparently, this was somewhat acknowledged kind of in the inner circle of the executive office of the DNR for the last 25 years. But to my knowledge, it's never been, for one, out there in public, and for two, it's never been used as an attempt to override or replace a commission decision. And that's where I think we might be today, or at least this uncertainty has been brought forward because there was an attempt to sort of separate those two authorities. So the commission would only have authority over whether we hunt or trap a species, for example. And the state, the DNR, would have then authority over setting an opening day or things like quotas when it comes to antlerless, deer quotas or things like that, where they're trying to remove the commission from those decisions.
Hang tight, Amy. And listen, I hate to interrupt you midstream, but you know how this works. When I'm out of time, I'm out of time. We've got to take a break. We're talking with Amy Trotter, Executive Director of MUCC, but she is going to stick around for the next segment, which happens to be the Ask Avery segment right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Houghton Lake on the Twister 92.1 WTWS. You can hear us in Holland on WHTC. That's 1450 AM, 99.7 FM. And you can hear us in Manistee on WMLQ 97.7 FM. The Ask Avery segment is brought to you each week by my friends at Security Credit Union. Security Credit Union loves to work with outdoorsmen and women, and they can help you with your next outdoor adventure. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. Amy Trotter of MUCC is on the line with us right now, so we're going to get kind of a twofer here. Amy, one of the things... And listen, we're going to have to get you back on a Wednesday Night Live to flesh some of these topics out because of our limited time here. But one of the things people are constantly asking me about, hence the Ask Avery segment, what is the status of the consent decree negotiations with the tribes? This thing has dragged on forever. Why can't we get this thing solved? So I'm going to throw that out to you, Amy Trotter, Executive Director, as one of the groups involved in this situation. Where do we stand?
We do have a news story this week, actually. So MUCC is a part of a coalition to protect Michigan's resources, a separate nonprofit engaged in these negotiations as an amici. And the amici group is similarly frustrated. This was supposed to be wrapped up in August of 2020. Certainly COVID had its impacts. The current consent decree right now has been extended to September 30th. And I can say, I guess, just from that timeline, you'll hear that it's not going so great.
Yeah.
So, we're about 2 years behind. But we are frustrated as an amici at this point. And this week, we are actually going to file a motion in federal court, joined with another amici group, the Bay to Knot Great Lakes Sports Fishermen, to intervene in the case as a party directly. Right now, as an amici group, we have to work through the state of Michigan to express our concerns at the table, and that process has not been going well. We have been pretty frustrated. Currently, the 2000 consent decree, we feel, does a decent job balancing between recreational and commercial fishing of lake trout and whitefish in the treaty waters through a zonal approach. But at this point in the negotiations, we are asserting that the breakdown in the relationship with the state has gotten to the point that, in our opinion, the Great Lakes fisheries resources are threatened, and we are concerned about the premise that we come to the table with, that it should be a shared allocation of the fishery.
So apparently you're seeing some things, obviously, that you don't like, but to the point where you're stepping out of the boundaries of how you've been operating to try to get some action here.
That is correct. And certainly I wish I could say more, because this has been such a heightened and important negotiation. All of those of us engaged at the table are subject to a non-disclosure agreement. So we can't get into specifics about, what the proposals are or anything like that. But, that is where we're at, is that, we are concerned about our interaction at the table and whether or not our sport fishing interests are being heard. And we want to elevate our status as interveners into this case.
And I get it that you can't talk specifics, and I understand that, and I respect that. So what happens now then, this legal action you're taking, what's next?
Well, this is just the filing of a motion. It is up to the judge to, grant or dismiss this motion. And, we won't know the results of that for, some time again. We are going to remain at the table and as engaged as we can be, certainly with our interests in, Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, and Lake Huron at the forefront. Recreational fishing is critical to the state of Michigan. We know that from the economic data, the licenses sold, all of those things. And our sport fishery is critical to Michigan's way of life. And that is not to say that we don't support the sovereign tribes being able to share in that fishery. We absolutely do. But we do, as far as this negotiations are going and a future successor consent decree, we believe that we need a better seat at the table, I guess, if we will.
Regardless of the outcome, maybe this lights a fire under some people.
I think that's certainly we have to, let all the other parties know of our frustration. And, that is certainly an intended outcome as well.
Amy, I love talking with you because I know there are things you can say and things you can't, and I can just hear these words trying to work their way out of your mouth, and you're saying, I can't, and I appreciate that. And I do appreciate, Amy, what you and everybody at MUCC are doing. The website, MUCC.org, and we will get Amy back on a Wednesday Night Live very soon so we can talk more about these things. And again, a thank you to the folks at Security Credit Union for making each week's Ask Avery segment possible. If you have a question for me, email it to me, Mike at MikeAveryOutdoors.com, Mike at MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and the website for Security Credit Union, securitycu.org. We'll take a break. When we come back in our third hour, we're talking trolling with Mark Romanack here on Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Tree Stands, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 3 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show. Outdoor Magazine Radio heard on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan. The podcast version of the show available just about anywhere you get your podcasts from. I love to be here in the studio. It's really something I look forward to. I am truly blessed to be able to be in a job that I absolutely love. And I look forward to my time here, recording the radio show and recording the podcasts. When I'm not in the studio or working on the show and the podcasts, this time of year, if the wind's not blowing, you are more than likely to find me on the water. I absolutely love fishing. And I used to fish salmon a lot. I used to go over to Lake Michigan, fish trout and salmon. These days, the past several years, pretty much sticking closer to home and fishing Saginaw Bay Walleye. I love to troll for walleye. Now, I get the fact that there's something very exciting and very basic about having the rod in your hand, say jigging for fish, to have a fish hit the bait while the rod is in your hand. I get that, and I love that. But the act of trolling, I am fascinated by. I find it very interesting. I find there's a lot of subtleties and nuances that are involved in trolling that if you do it right and want to be productive at it, there's a lot involved. But when I think of trolling, I think of Mark Romanack. Now, listen, Mark is a very accomplished, very broad-based angler, and he can catch fish any way, any tactic, any technique, any water. But I found myself here this last week reaching out to Mark. I had some questions about trolling and dive curves and how to use the Precision Trolling app and how to combine different things. And I thought, if I have these questions, a lot of people probably have these questions. And Mark has agreed to spend some time with us here in this hour of the Outdoor Magazine show. And he's on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Mark Romanack, welcome back. How are you?
Mike, I'm doing great. I'm just sitting here enjoying another beautiful day in Michigan.
Well, here where I am in the studio, it's actually raining, and man, do we need this rain. What's it doing out your window?
Well, I'm actually south of you today. I came down to Lake St. Clair to do a little bit of filming down here, and so the rain has passed here already, and it's turned into a very nice day to go fishing.
And you don't need much of an excuse to go fishing, do you?
No, I generally don't.
Listen, let's talk about trolling here for a few minutes. This Precision Trolling, what is now an app. I still call it the Troller's Bible because I think about it as the definitive go-to place to find information on how deep our baits are running. How did this concept come about, Mark? How did you come up with this?
Well, I wish I could take credit for coming up with the concept. It actually wasn't my initial idea. The initial idea goes back to one of my earlier partners when I first got started in this industry, and it was Dr. Stephen Holt, who actually came up with the concept. And Steve had been doing quite a bit of night fishing on places like Muskegon Lake, where they pull crankbaits along the edges of the seawalls and that type of stuff. And he had theorized that, he didn't know how much line to let out to get his lure down. And he was a smart enough troller that he knew that the more line you let out, the deeper it would go. But he had no clue, where it was running in the water column. And he was frustrated by that. And he came to the concept that if he could go underwater and actually pull crankbaits past a scuba diver, that he could document exactly how deep a crankbait goes on various line diameters and various lead lengths. And so it was his brainchild. And I came in later when he needed help with the marketing and promotion and more work with the company. But it was Steve Holt's idea. So I give that man a lot of credit. He was light years ahead of his time.
Well, and I have to give him obviously credit as well, but what you have done to take this to the next level and beyond. Now, you mentioned that you guys take the guesswork out of this. I mean, it's not, okay, I think it's running this deep because we're bouncing bottom. No, you put somebody in the water and run baits past them.
We, early on in the testing, the very first thing that we had to do is we kind of had to figure out what were the variables and how the variables were impacting. And so the very first thing that we wanted to check was how line diameter impacts, how lead length impacts, how trolling speed impacts. And we were able to do those things initially. So that's how it started, is just confirming what really happens underwater. And the only way to confirm that was to use a scuba diver, because if you can't see it with your own eyes, you can't document it, you can't confirm it. And that's how this all started, with a scuba diver. Fortunately, Dr. Holt was not only a medical doctor, but he also was a very skilled open water scuba diver. So that gave us a little bit of an advantage there, because we could put Steve in the water, I could troll the baits past him, and he could document their depth.
And are you still using that practice today?
We've modified it over the years, but the essential way that we do it still has not changed. We use a floating buoy, if you will, and it has what's called a descent line. Divers use this to go up and down in the water rapidly. And then attached to that descent line, we use a tape measure. And so I'm basically trolling past the tape measure, and the scuba diver goes down and is looking for the bait and then confirming where the bait passes the tape measure. So we measure a select amount of line, say a 25-foot lead, and we get a number for that. And then we'll do a longer lead and a longer lead and a longer lead until we get to the point where we have the sense that the bait is no longer going any deeper that's kind of maxed out and it's just flattening out. And so, as you might imagine, this is time consuming. Like, I mean, it's ridiculously time consuming. But in a day and age where people are talking about algorithms and using mathematical formulas to predict dive curves, it just doesn't work. And the reason those algorithms don't work is because there are too many variables involved, and the variables are constantly changing. So the only way to do this, in my opinion, is to get your butt in a wetsuit, get underwater, and see what's actually going on.
All right, so of these different factors, these different variables, speed, line diameter, and lead length, what's the most important?
I think that lead length is overwhelmingly the most important. And just about any fundamental troller who spent any amount of time out trolling crankbaits or other devices knows that the further you put it back, the deeper it's naturally going to dive. But you also get to a point of diminishing return. I mean, certain devices will only go so deep, and you can't take a popular, crankbait like a Hottentot and let it back, 2, football fields and think that it's going to, continue to go deeper just because you let it back a country mile. There is a point of diminishing return. Friction is basically what happens. Is eventually there's enough friction on the line that the lures just simply can't go any deeper. And so we've kind of documented where that point of diminishing return is, and it's about 200 feet. There are some crankbaits that will continue to dive deeper beyond 200 feet, but for all intents and purposes, if you let out more than 200 foot of line, you're just letting the line out to make yourself feel better. You're not getting any additional depth out of your lures.
Well, and you start letting lines out 200 feet or so. I mean, I know what happens if I do that. I'm just looking for trouble, looking for tangles. But you've come up with other methods to get those baits deeper without letting out more line.
Absolutely. And the simple solution, and what a lot of people have been doing for many years, is they've been using fuse lines, things like Fireline, which is a Berkeley product, or any of the Spectra braids. What I'm talking about are lines that are super thin in diameter, and because they're thinner in diameter, they have less friction, and they allow lures to go a little bit deeper. And so a lot of guys do that, but the problem is that only gets you modestly deeper, like about 15 to 20% deeper. And so it helps, but it doesn't necessarily get your baits to the depth you might be trying to achieve. And so then there becomes a third option. And the third option is to add weight to the line. And if you add weight to the line, something like an offshore tackle snap weight, now you're really talking significant increases in depth because, of course, the weight is dragging the bait down as well as the bait having its own natural diving ability. So when you combine the two, you end up with super deep diving depths. And that's becoming very popular here in the Great Lakes.
So many things to talk about, Mark. I mean, you talk about the braided lines, the super lines, the snap weights. We haven't even talked too much about speed yet. But all of this information, and we will. I mean, I've set some time aside today so we can really go into depth here. But all of this information, these dive curves, are available using an app these days. Tell me more about that before we take a break.
Well, the app is very simple. For those people who have been trolling for a lot of years, maybe they bought one of our books in the past. Our precision trolling books were just flip charts. Is basically what they were, and they had an XY graph on them, a picture of the lure, and down one side of the graph was how deep the lure would be running, and down the other side of the graph was how much line you'd have to let out to achieve that. And so they were very simple, very intuitive. Everybody loved them because you could just have a glance and you could say, I want my bait to run this deep. This is how much line I need to let out. But the problem with books and flip charts is you can't really update them. And so we're in a situation where we're collecting, hundreds of pieces of data in any given year. And so people want that data as soon as they can. Well, you can't update a book, but you can update an app. And so the reason we went to creating a digital format or an app format was so that we could create data and then upload it to the app very quickly so people would get that information as fast as possible.
And more on that, and listen, I got to take a quick break, more on that app and all other things at fishing411.net, fishing411.net. We're talking trolling with Mark Romanack, the man himself, right here on Outdoor Magazine. You You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Ludington on News 97, 98, 98.7 WLDN. You can hear us on the other side of the state, Port Huron, WPHM, 1380 AM. And let's go north of the bridge and west of the bridge to Iron Mountain, WMIQ, 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Boning Archery. Michigan-based Boning has been a leader in the archery industry since 1946. That's what, 76, 77? I'm not a math guy. 3/4 of a century of producing high-quality archery-related gear. The folks at Boning like to say they make everything for bows and arrows except bows and arrows. Check them out online at boning.com. That's BOHNING, boning.com. And we're getting to the time of the year when archery season, bow season is really coming up pretty fast. It is just around the corner. I would bet that as you get ready for this hunting season, if you look at your gear, there is some Boning product on your rig somewhere. And if not, maybe there should be. Michigan-based Boning Archery, 75 years in the archery industry, boning.com. While you are online, after you've checked out boning.com and after you've checked out MikeAveryOutdoors.com, head on over to fishing411.net. Fishing411.net, the website of Mark Romanack of Fishing 411 TV and Precision Trolling. Mark, before the break, we were talking about the app, the Precision Trolling app. How do we get it? How do we get that information on our phones?
Well, it's a paid app, and so you're going to go to either, if you have an Android phone, you're going to go to the Google Play Store. If you have an Apple phone, you're going to go to the Apple App Store, and all you have to do is just search Precision Trolling data, and up comes the information that you need. You can buy individual dive curves, say, for example, just the popular lures that you personally own and use, or you can buy all of our data, which is called the Lifetime app, and that is updatable. In other words, if you buy the Lifetime app, as we create more data, you don't have to pay for that. It just uploads to your phone, and you continue to get the new data as we continue to create it.
All right, say, for example, I get a dive curve for a number 7 flicker shad. Do I own that forever, or do I have to renew that every year?
Nope, it's not a subscription. You own it, and so you own it, and you can actually transfer it to other phones, so long as you stay within the same phone platform. When apps are put together, one of the things you can't do is a paid app. You can't transfer from platform to platform. In other words, you can't buy it on an Android phone and then transfer it to an iPhone later. The reason for that is that the companies that are selling you this, Google Play and Apple, they're using your special ID that you have to use in order to replicate the data. So if you stay within the same phone platform and say you get an Apple phone, then you get another Apple phone, then a year later you get another Apple phone, you can always upload it at no cost to the new phone, so long as you stay within the same phone platform.
Gotcha. All right, so we're talking about dive curves and how deep your baits will go. What role does speed play? If I troll at 2.5, am I going to get a bait deeper than if I'm at 1.8?
Well, this goes back to one of those basic things that we tested before we even started creating data, is how does speed influence on a diving crankbait? And most crankbaits, as you know, are floating varieties. They're plastic, some are wood, but they have a diving lip, and so the further you let them back, the deeper they dive. And the faster you troll them, the more they vibrate or wiggle. You can actually feel it right on the rod tip. So common sense would suggest that if they're working harder, they're diving deeper, but that is not the case. Floating style crankbaits dive basically the same depth, regardless of what speed. And, and I'm talking from what a fisherman would do. 1 mile an hour being about the slowest we typically ever troll, out to about 3.5 or 4 miles an hour, which is about the fastest we typically ever troll. Within that parameter, a diving crankbait isn't going to go any deeper at different speeds. And it's very simple how that works. It plays to a phenomenon that's friction. Again, the more friction on the line, pushing the bait back to the surface, while friction on the bait's lip is trying to push the bait back down.
So if speed does not make our baits go deeper, why are there days when fish want baits trolled slower and some days they want them faster?
That really plays to what the fish are looking for, and it changes the action. Speeding up or slowing down definitely changes the action of the lure because it livens it if you go faster, and it deadens the action if you go slower. And some days those fish are looking for a softer, deader action, and other days they're looking for a livelier, more lifelike action. And so you are spot on, Mike. Trolling speed makes all the difference in terms of triggering strikes. It just doesn't make a difference in terms of how deep those lures are actually diving. So that's one good thing that we found, because can you imagine if speeding up and slowing down changed the depth the lure was running, how complex it would be to figure out where they're at in the water column?
Well, but some of your dive curves do take speed into account. For example, if you're trolling an offshore tadpole or a snap weight, then your speed is a factor, isn't it?
Yeah, and what we do is we put that into categories of what I call speed-dependent devices. If something sinks, like a tadpole, such as you mentioned, or a snap weight, if it sinks, it's going to be speed-dependent. In other words, if you go slower, it's going to sink deeper. If you speed up, friction is going to be increased. It's going to rise in the water column. And so anytime something sinks, or anytime you add, a sinking device to a floating device, like in other words, maybe a snap weight to a crankbait, now you have to concentrate on speed. You have to monitor speed as well as lead lengths and line diameters in order to get the baits where you want them. And it's a little more complex, but it's very doable. And that's something that we do with a system that we call the 50+2 method, which is essentially putting a snap weight on the line about 50 foot up the line from your crankbait, and then regulating more lead and trolling speeds in order to dial the bait into the depth you're looking for.
How do I find the 50+2 method on the app?
That's a really good question, because a ton of people struggle with it. The 50+2 method does not work with every crankbait because we haven't tested it with every crankbait yet. I believe it's somewhere around 60 different baits that we've actually tested this with at this point. And so if you go to the line type option, you'll see monofilament, you'll see braided line option. You'll sometimes see a lead core option, and that's where you'll also see the 50+2 option. If you just touch on the 50+2 option, and that comes up on your screen, now you're looking at 50+2 data. If that lure doesn't show 50+2 under the line type options, we haven't tested it yet with a snap weight.
Okay, so 50+2 would be put out 50 feet on the crankbait, then clip on a 2-ounce snap weight. The number that I'm seeing on the dive curve, is that 50 plus, say, 80, or is it 80 total? I mean, how does that all work?
Well, there's two lead lengths associated with this, and one of them is always the same, and the other one is variable. The first one is when you take your lure, let's say that flicker shad or flicker minnow that you were talking about earlier, you let it out 50 foot and put a 2-ounce offshore tackle snap weight on the line. Now, at that point, you can consult your app and say, how deep do I want this to run? I need it to go 20 foot. So you want it to go 20 foot, so you dial up on the feet down picker wheel 20 feet. And then you go over to the feet back wheel, and it'll spit out the total amount of line you have to let out. Not just the 50-foot initial lead, but the additional backer lead that you need to let out to get that crankbait to run 20 foot. So, in other words, the app is doing the math for you, Mike.
And does a 2-ounce snap weight in front of that bait affect the action at all?
Doesn't affect the action, but boy, does it affect the depth.
Yeah.
And when we've always known that adding weight to a crankbait is going to make it go deeper. And we did a lot of experimenting before we came out with the 50+2 with different size snap weights. For example, a 1-ounce snap weight will make a bait go deeper, but not exponentially. You don't get much more depth by adding a 1-ounce snap weight. If you go to a 3-ounce snap weight, holy smokes, you're talking about deep. It goes probably deeper than most of us would ever need a crankbait to go. So that's kind of overkill. So the just right size snap weight is the 2-ounce snap weight. It'll get you to the depth you need, allows you to use relatively short lead lengths, and they're light enough that you can still fish them with crankbaits and planer boards. For example, you want to use an offshore board to get all this stuff out to the side, you can still do that with a 2-ounce snap weight. You start getting bigger snap weight, now you've got too much resistance for the planer boards to deal with.
All right, let's add one more factor to this whole mix here about getting baits as deep as we possibly can. If a bait isn't running right, it's going to blow out to one side or another, and it's not going to go as deep as possible. How do we address that?
Well, what you're talking about is a very common problem called bait tuning, or a bait being out of tune. And if you just put a bait behind the back of the boat and you're trolling it, and it wants to, to flank out to the left or flank out to the right, that bait is not tuned. So if you let it all the way out on your lead length and put it on your board, it's going to blow out, especially in turns and things like that, and it's not going to run at the depth it could run. and it's going to keep coming to the surface and then catching and then going back down, it's basically going to be useless. So what we look for is a crankbait that runs perfectly straight in the water. And the way to achieve that is through tuning. And the only way to tune a crankbait is that little tiny eye tie in the very front and the lip. It has to be bent slightly either left or right to get the bait to run perfectly straight. That's the bad news. The good news is modern crankbaits typically come in the package now pretty well tuned, because the techniques that they use for making crankbaits nowadays is much better than it used to be. But the crankbait is still eventually going to go out of tune, and so you're still going to have to put a needle nose pliers on it and bend that little eye tie to get it to run perfectly straight in the water.
And I'll tell people this all the time. I say, hey, check that bait before you let it out there. And they'll put it 6 feet behind the boat at 2.5 miles an hour and go, oh, yeah, it's running just fine. That's not the way to check it, is it?
No, in fact, it's very difficult to check a bait close to the boat because you don't see much line out, so you don't see whether it's flanking left or right very much. What I like to tell people is let that bait back about 30 or 40 feet and then reel it in as fast as you can reel it in. And as you're cranking on that handle and that bait is coming back to the boat quickly, you'll know immediately if it's running left or right or if it's running dead center.
And it doesn't take much of an adjustment at all, does it?
Tiny, tiny adjustments. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky for people because they grab a hold of that eye tie and they bend it with a needle nose pliers, and the bait that was running left is now running right.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's real easy to make a bad situation worse. So you have to bend that eye tie attachment very, very modestly. Tools like the Easy Crankbait Tuner from offshore are a nice tools in this regard because you can set the tension so you don't bend the eye tie too much. So they work very, very nicely in that regard. So most guys will do it with a needle nose pliers, but if you haven't tried an Easy Crankbait Tuner, you'll be surprised how much easier it is to tune a crankbait with one of those simple pliers.
Mark, I knew when I scheduled this show that I was going to offer you the coveted third segment, and that is the case. Have you got a few more minutes for me?
Absolutely. Always love talking to you, Mike.
I appreciate that. Then we will continue our conversation with Mark Romanack here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. Their website, fishing411.net, fishing411.net. If you are a troller, I'm telling you, if you're not using this precision trolling app, you are, pun intended, you're missing the boat. I as much as I fish and as much as I know the baits that I fish, I am constantly looking at this app to see how I can do things differently, to see how I can use this 50+2 method to get them down deeper. But I have run into a problem that I think Mark Romanack can answer for me, and that'll be coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the show on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan, including WSJM in St. Joe. That's 94.9 FM. And if we jump to the other side of the state, WSGW in Saginaw, that's 790 AM, 100.5 FM. In fact, I'm in the studios of WSGW right now here with Charlie Rood, and because it's raining right now, the crowds are not what they would normally be. Normally on a bright, sunny day, we've got all kinds of people out there with signs yelling, Charlie, Charlie. But today, Charlie, I think the rain has kept the crowds down, but we know they're out there in spirit. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Reader Landscaping. Reader can take care of your lawn and property because it's your nature and our nurture. Let Reader create an outdoor getaway for you in your backyard as they have for me. The website, readerlandscaping.com. That's readerlandscaping.com. And the guys from Reader are glad to see this rain as well. Right now, we're talking with Mark Romanack about trolling, how to be a better troller, how get the most out of your baits, out of your lures. Mark, I got a question for you. On my offshore OR12 planer boards, I was running the snapper releases on the front, and I thought, you know what, I'm getting myself in trouble because since they're not releasing, I'm getting more tangles. But if I switch to the OR19, the orange clip, I can just use the loop trick that I saw you do online. I can release those boards and they'll drop back out of my spread. The problem is I'm using that loop and I can't get those OR, or the 19s or the 16s, whatever, the orange clip. I can't get them to release even though the clip is set on the most the most forgiving, the least tension setting? What am I doing wrong? I know you can't see what I'm doing, but what are some tips for me?
Well, first of all, let's make sure people understand. The red releases, those are the OR-16s, and they have a pin in them, and they're not designed to release. Okay?
Yep.
You put the line in there, they're designed to stay on the line. The other release you're talking about, the orange ones, those are the OR-19s, and those are designed to release. Now, you can put the line straight in the release like you normally would, and you can get it to release from the planer board, but you got to jerk on your rod pretty hard in order to pop that line free. I'm not comfortable with that because essentially what you're doing is you're jerking on the planer board and jerking on the fish. I'm afraid I'm going to literally tear the lure right out of the fish's face. So what I do instead is something that's called the loop trick that you talked about. And the loop trick is nothing more than just before you put the board on the line, you grab the line with your index finger, and if you spin your index finger 5 or 6 times, you'll create a small little loop and a few twists of line. I put those twists of line into the orange OR-19 release, and you're going to see a little tiny loop that sticks out, maybe about a half an inch, 3/4 of an inch that sticks out. That's fine. And then I'll take the line back to the OR-16, the red release, and put it in there to get it behind the pin. Now, when that is out to the side and you're trolling with that and you get a fish on, you see your board start to go back. When you put tension on the rod and give it just a slight little tunk, that line from the loop is going to pull through the release very smoothly and very easily, and the board is going to trip. But keep in mind something. The board is tripped. It's no longer planing, but it's still attached to the line thanks to that red OR-16. And that's what I'm looking for. I don't want the board to be dragging, so I have to fight the board and the fish. I want the board to release so I can reel in the fish with the least amount of effort and get the fish to the boat as fast as possible, because a board that hasn't released is not easy to reel in, and I think you probably experienced that.
Absolutely. How far am I putting the line twists into that release?
I would typically bury it, and the reason I do that is because you don't know what your trolling conditions are going to be. Is it going to be calm? Is it going to be rough? Are you going to be trolling 1.5 miles an hour? Are you going to be trolling 3 miles an hour? So I generally bury it, and that's the beauty of the loop trick, is that when you twist that line, you've created more purchase. You've created more surface area for the release to grab onto. So false releases go out the window. You don't have to worry about a false release. And in fact, most times the fish doesn't release it. Most time you have to come tight on the line and give the rod a little bump. I call it a little, snap of the rod tip to pull that loop free. But that's exactly what I want. I want the board to release when I want it to release, not just because a fish grabbed a hold of it.
Well, I think this presentation shows a lot of promise. I just need to continue to experiment with it. When I look at your website, Mark, before we let you go, fishing411.net, it says an educational fishing show. I think this conversation we've had today really points that out. But what's the reason for this? I mean, yeah, you can entertain people, and you do, but why the focus on education?
I think the thing that we've noticed in the years of television, and before that when I was an outdoor writer, is that people want to do this. They're really enthusiastic, but they need a little bit of information in order to have confidence to go out and do it. And if we give them just enough confidence that they're willing to launch the boat and go out and play with these things and try them, they will have some success. And then that success will build on more success. So my job is to give people enough confidence, give them enough information that they can be kind of dangerous out there, and then over time they're going to learn more and they're going to get very skillful.
Mark Romanack, you are certainly an icon in the fishing industry. I think what you've accomplished over the years is very, very impressive. And I know that you're not done yet, and you got a lot of years ahead of you, and I can't wait to see what you got. Well, I understand what you're saying. You got Jake there ready to take over, but you got a lot of great things ahead of you, Mark, and I can't wait to see what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Mike. It's always a pleasure visiting with you.
Mark Romanack of Fishing 411 TV, the website fishing411.net, fishing411.net, and the Precision Trolling app. I know Mark's about my age, and he's thinking, it's time to let the young guys, basically his son Jake, who was doing a wonderful job, take over. And I get that, but I am big fans of the Romanaks and what they've accomplished, and I would encourage you to check them out as well. Fishing411.net and the Precision Trolling app. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with another guy that I'm a big fan of, wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar, right here on Outdoor Magazine. welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. My name is Mike Avery, also known as the Big Guy. My website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. No, I'm not going to give you my cell phone. But you can always get in touch with me via email, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. I appreciate you being along with us this week. And if you've been with us before, you'll know I wrap up each week's show with wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. And guess what? He's here once again. David, welcome back. How are you?
Yippee-ki-yay. Couldn't be happier.
Oh.
If you forgot your cell phone number, I'll give it out.
I know you've got it, but let's not give it out, okay? Or I'll give yours out.
That's okay. It'll be just reservations.
Oh, so what's going on, David?
Oh, just working, just trying to keep ahead of the game. We've been busier than all get out. Not no help, so that's the way life is, I guess, nowadays.
Well, how about a recipe for us? What do you got in mind this week?
Well, I lived in Florida for a long time, as you all know. So I used to do this recipe with snapper, grouper, spot-tail redfish. I did it with wahoo. And we used to be able to go fishing and sell whatever you caught at the restaurant. So anything I would do like this. So it's... we call it Louisiana style on the menu right now, but it's 8 to 10 ounces of boneless, skinless filet per person. And them nice 17, 18, 19-inch fish have got just about the perfect size, And then you're going to need 3 large shrimp per order per person, 6 or 7 mussels per person. You can buy the frozen mussels, which are just good at either a fish shop or a Myers or a Kroger's, right in the freezer section. And about 8 to 10 scallops also. Same thing, you can buy them in the seafood sections. A couple eggs, flour, about 2 ounces of white wine. A nice tart wine would be good. Say if you're drinking, say a Chardonnay with this meal, by all means use that. About an ounce and a half of heavy cream. And if you're watching your caloric intake, omit it, but it's a lot better with it. 2 to 4 buds of garlic there, diced up real fine. About a quarter jar of chicken gravy. Or if you take the bones and you boil the bones, boil them for about a good half hour, strain it off and thicken that up. It's your option, but it's a lot easier for the chicken gravy. A couple tablespoons, 3, maybe 4 tablespoons of diced onions real fine. So what you're going to do, you're going to dredge the fish in flour, shake most of that flour off, dip it in straight beaten up eggs, and then in a nice hot pan, you're going to brown with the skin side up. So when you turn it over, the rib side will be facing the diner, because you only want to do this one time. And it's going to take probably 2 minutes. And so you're going to place those fillets in a casserole. I don't know if I mentioned this is about for 2 recipes, maybe 3, because the average person is not going to have a saute pan like we have at the restaurant to put, say, 4 of them in it. So you're going to wipe the pan out and then add a little bit of oil, olive oil if you like. Saute the onions and garlic just for a little bit on a lower temperature. You want to leave them not brown, but just a nice, flavor breaking temperature, so that flavor will be broke loose instead of, because you're only going to bake this for a little while. So, and then you can add the white wine, lemon juice, everything else except for the seafood, and then bring that up to a boil. Cook it down. Just maybe a quarter of the volume. So you're going to end up with 3/4 of the volume of the liquid. So taste it. Make sure it's to your flavor. If you want to add some spice to it, or you want to put cayenne or some kind of Cajoning, you could also do that. We offer this mild or wild at the restaurant, so you can get it spicier with really actually no spice. So pour this over the fish, and then you can put around in the liquid the mussels, the shrimp, and the scallops, so that they're going to cook, because it's only going to be a little while, maybe 8 or 10 minutes tops, 350 degrees. So you're going to take the fillet out, lay that in your... probably you're going to have to have a platter if you want. And then I like to put about 6 mussels on each side of the fillet and distribute those scallops. And you can place the 3 shrimp on top of the fillet and sprinkle with it a little bit of parsley. And the whole process is going to be about 12 to 15 minutes. So you want to make sure you got everything else ready to go for your meal, because this is a quick dish. And you don't want to overcook walleye or reduce it down too much. You want a lot of that sauce so that you can dip it up with a spoon or a biscuit or some bread.
And real quick, how do you know when walleye, or I guess any fish, is done?
To feel. If you cook fish for a long time, in a pan or something, you can feel. You can touch that fish with your finger, and if it has a lot of resistance, then it's done. If it has, you can touch the fish before you do anything with it, and it's going to be soft and spongy. So when you feel it, and if it's firm, it's done. If it's still soft and spongy, like that raw fish was, then you're going to take and cook it a little longer.
Got it. Great advice from wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. David, how do we try your cooking in person?
Well, we're at Oscar and Joey's on Thursday through Sunday, 4 p.m. on the corner of Birch Run Road, Dixie Highway, and beautiful downtown Birch Run there, right a tenth of a mile east of the expressway.
Wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. Almost said something I shouldn't, Dave.
That's okay. You can call me.
All right, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Dave Minar at Oscar and Joey's Roadhouse. My website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Do not hesitate to reach out with questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, suggestions, whatever. I'm here. Let me know what's on your mind. Don't forget about Wednesday Night Live on my social media outlets. I also do a Behind the Mic every Wednesday morning at 8:45. Hope you get a chance to get out and enjoy this summer weather. Before you know it, it's going to be fall, right? But that's not bad either. Talk to you next time right here on Outdoor Magazine.